My name is Heidi, and at 32 years of age, I never imagined I would find myself without a home following a Sunday family meal. When my mother yelled at me to leave and never return, I genuinely followed through this time. What she was unaware of was that I had been quietly covering their $2,200 mortgage payment for 3 years. The expression of disbelief on my father Richard's face when he contacted me weeks afterward, inquiring about the bank notification, was something I will always remember. If you have ever dealt with unhealthy family relationships, please give this video a like and subscribe. Share in the comments where you're viewing from, and stay tuned to discover how establishing limits transformed everything. Growing up in the Hamilton home was like treading on fragile ground, particularly around my mother, Gloria. From my earliest recollections, she maintained impossibly elevated standards that appeared specifically crafted to ensure my failure. My father, Richard, served as the mediator, the person who would quietly enter my room following one of Mom's outbursts to reassure me that things would be fine. However, he never truly confronted her. He simply resolved matters temporarily until the subsequent eruption. My family was composed of 5 individuals. My parents, my older brother Justin, who is 36, my sister Elizabeth, who is 34, and myself at 32. Being the youngest, I endured the majority of my mother's progressive disappointments. Justin departed for college at 18 and seldom returned home thereafter. Elizabeth did the same 2 years later, which left me isolated with my parents throughout my final year of high school, absorbing the complete intensity of my mother's critical disposition. Every accomplishment was evaluated against an invisible, constantly changing benchmark. When I returned home with a report card containing 5 A grades and 1 B, my mother would concentrate solely on the B. What occurred here? Did you fail to study adequately? Elizabeth never received anything below an A-. These comparisons were relentless and devastating. My selection of friends became another source of conflict. That Olivia girl appears superficial. I disapprove of how she presents herself, my mother would comment after encountering a new friend. And why are you wearing those jeans? They make you appear larger than you are. Remarks about my physical appearance began when I was approximately 12 and never ceased. The most intense arguments concerned my future. When I demonstrated interest in finance during high school, my mother dismissed it. Women are not regarded seriously in that profession. You should select something more practical like nursing. Yet, finance captivated me, the manner in which numbers could convey narratives and forecast results. I discreetly applied to business programs contrary to her desires. My father was employed as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical corporation for 28 years. He earned substantial income, sufficient for my mother to remain a stay-at-home mom, even following our maturity. She derived pride from their 5-bedroom colonial residence with its perfectly maintained lawn and designer furnishings. The house represented her territory, her achievement, despite never contributing financially to it. I ultimately graduated with honors in finance from Cornell University. Once again, failing to satisfy my mother's expectations because I did not gain admission to Harvard as she had desired. Nevertheless, I obtained a position at a prestigious financial management firm immediately after college and advanced to senior financial advisor by the age of 28. My clients had confidence in me. My supervisors appreciated me. However, at family occasions, my mother would present me with, "This is Heidi. She handles money," as though my career was a pastime not worthy of explanation. 3 years ago, circumstances changed dramatically when my father was dismissed during company reorganization. At 59, he found it challenging to locate comparable employment. The severance compensation was substantial, but not unlimited. My mother declined to reduce their lifestyle or contemplate obtaining employment herself. At my age, who would employ me, and we cannot abandon this house? What would others think? I uncovered their financial difficulties accidentally during a visit home. I discovered my father at the kitchen table late one evening, surrounded by bills, his head resting in his hands. When I inquired what was troubling him, he collapsed emotionally and confessed they were 3 months behind on the mortgage and facing foreclosure. Without informing them, I contacted their mortgage company the following day. I established automatic payments from my personal account for their $2,200 monthly mortgage. It represented a substantial portion of my income. Yet I possessed savings and maintained a modest lifestyle despite my success. I could manage it, and the prospect of my parents losing their residence was intolerable. I never disclosed to them what I had accomplished. My father eventually secured part-time employment that he maintained covered their expenses, and I pretended to accept this. Reflecting back, I should have identified the indications that something remained problematic. The new credit cards my mother acquired, the evasive manner. My father responded to questions regarding their finances, the escalating tension between them. Their house was a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom colonial-style residence in an affluent suburb of Boston. The kitchen had undergone remodeling when I was in high school with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that my mother had demanded. The formal dining room contained the mahogany table where we had assembled for strained holiday meals since I was young. My former bedroom remained mostly unchanged since I relocated, a time capsule of lavender walls and academic awards. Despite the unease I experienced there, the household memories persisted. The height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe, the dent in the living room wall from when Justin hurled a baseball inside, the window seat in the front room where I would read for extended periods, escaping into stories where families genuinely cared for each other. It proved more difficult to depart than I anticipated when the moment arrived. I visited my parents no less than twice monthly despite the anxiety that developed in my stomach each time I turned onto their street. These visits were mainly for my father. Following the loss of his job, his self-assurance had deteriorated. I was concerned about his mental well-being, particularly when I observed how substantially the liquor bottles in their cabinet appeared to deplete between my visits. The warning indicators were omnipresent, becoming more intense over the previous year. My mother's criticism became more caustic, less concealed as concern. When I brought homemade lasagna for dinner, her preferred dish, she took a single bite and questioned if I had utilized low-fat cheese because she could detect the difference and not favorably. When I volunteered to assist with cleaning, she would trail behind me, rewashing dishes I had already completed, sighing audibly to ensure I acknowledged it. My father withdrew further into himself during these exchanges. He would fix his gaze on his plate or suddenly recall something he needed to examine in the garage. The formerly confident man who had coached my soccer team and excelled at sales meetings now recoiled when my mother's voice elevated above normal speaking volume. He began maintaining a flask in his jacket pocket. I attempted everything to reconstruct a relationship with my mother. I brought considerate gifts, a cashmere scarf in her preferred blue, a first edition of the mystery novel she expressed wanting to read. I escorted her to lunch at costly restaurants. I even arranged a mother-daughter spa day for her birthday, expending $600 on treatments she complained about subsequently. The massage was too intense. I instructed her to reduce the pressure, but did she comply? "My back is going to be bruised tomorrow," she stated as we drove home, and that facial simply aggravated my rosacea. "I cannot understand why I allow you to convince me into these situations." Nothing succeeded. Every gesture was received with criticism or distrust. "Why are you being so agreeable all of a sudden? What do you desire?" she inquired once, as if kindness could only be transactional. My closest friend, Sophia, perceived through my artificial cheerfulness when I would return from these visits. One evening, over wine in my apartment, I finally broke down and revealed everything, including the mortgage payments I had been making in secrecy. "Heidi, honey, this is neither normal nor healthy," Sophia said, refilling my glass. "You are 32 years old, successful, brilliant, and beautiful, and you are being emotionally mistreated by your mother while financing their lifestyle. They're my parents, I objected weakly. What am I expected to do? Allow them to lose their house? Perhaps they should lose the house, Sophia argued. Perhaps they require a reality check. Your mom refuses to work. They will not downsize. And in the meantime, you are sacrificing your own financial future. Where are your boundaries? I lacked an answer. In our family, boundaries were perceived as selfish, especially when established by children against parents. My mother firmly subscribed to the honor thy father and mother commandment, selectively interpreting it to signify do whatever we instruct without question. The cultural expectation carried significant weight as well. In our community, adult children were anticipated to provide for aging parents. At church, at neighborhood gatherings, the worst designation you could receive was an ungrateful child who neglected family obligations. The reality that my parents were only in their early 60s and perfectly capable of sustaining themselves with modifications to their lifestyle appeared irrelevant against the burden of these expectations. Therefore, I continued the visits, the payments, the emotional acrobatics. I began experiencing panic attacks the evening before seeing them, my chest constricting until I could scarcely breathe. My therapist recommended reducing contact, yet the guilt was overpowering. What sort of daughter would I be if I abandoned them now? What I did not completely recognize then was how my mother's resentment toward me had been intensifying alongside my success. Each promotion, each client recognition, each financial achievement I attained seemed to amplify her bitterness. She had relinquished a promising career in real estate to raise children, a reality she reminded us of regularly. Observing me flourish in my chosen profession, unmarried and child-free by choice, contradicted everything she had been instructed about a woman's worth and purpose. "When are you going to settle down?" became her persistent refrain. Careers are pleasant, but family is what truly matters in the end. Nobody wishes they had devoted more time at the office on their deathbed. The irony that she appeared to genuinely dislike her own family was evidently lost on her. The final warning indication occurred 2 weeks prior to everything collapsing. I had appeared unannounced on a Tuesday evening, bringing dinner from their preferred Italian restaurant. I entered using the key they had provided me years earlier and heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. She believes she is so exceptional with her sophisticated job and her sophisticated apartment. She was stating, presumably to my father, "Little Miss Perfect constantly showing off. Does she believe we cannot see directly through her?" I stopped in the hallway, the paper bag of food becoming heavy in my arms. "Gloria, please." My father's voice sounded exhausted. "She is simply attempting to help. We do not require her assistance." My mother retorted. We were managing fine before she began meddling. I raised her better than this. To be so patronizing. I retreated silently and departed without them ever realizing I had been present. I remained in my car for 20 minutes, trembling before I could drive home. That evening I contacted Sophia and wept until my throat was sore. Next time will be different, I assured myself as I had numerous times previously. Next time I will defend myself. However, old patterns die hard, and the apprehension of confrontation had been ingrained into me since childhood. I did not realize then that next time would be the breaking point for all of us. My father's 60th birthday occurred on a Saturday in April. Despite my nervousness after overhearing my mother's comments, I chose to go home for the weekend to celebrate with them. I brought an overnight bag and a carefully wrapped gift box containing a Rolex watch I had spent months saving for. It was the precise model my father had admired in a magazine years earlier, saying, "Maybe when I retire." With his job loss, that retirement Rolex had become an unattainable dream, and I wanted to provide him something special to elevate his spirits. The tension was evident from the moment I arrived. My mother greeted me with a rigid hug and immediately remarked on my hair. "Oh, you cut it again." It was finally reaching a nice length. I had actually grown it out for months, but correcting her would only result in an argument. I had organized dinner reservations at an upscale steakhouse my father adored, but my mother rejected the plan. I already prepared his favorite pot roast. No need to squander money at those overpriced restaurants. So we ate at home at the formal dining table arranged with the good china that only emerged on special occasions. The conversation was awkward. I inquired about their friends, the neighbors, my father's garden. Each topic eventually circled back to some complaint or criticism. The pot roast was delicious, I had to acknowledge, but the meal felt interminable. My father drank 4 glasses of wine and became quieter with each one. When it came time for presents, I nervously handed over the blue gift box. My father opened it slowly, and his expression when he saw the watch was everything I had anticipated. Surprise, delight, disbelief. "Heidi, I cannot accept this. It is too much," he stammered, even as he removed it from the box and turned it over in his hands. "Of course you can," I insisted. "You deserve it, Dad. Happy birthday." My mother's face gone rigid. "How much did that cost?" she asked sharply. "Gloria," my father warned, but she disregarded him. "Must be nice to have so much disposable income," she continued. "Meanwhile, we are counting pennies for groceries." The evening deteriorated from there. My father attempted to smooth things over, but the damage was done. I went to bed early in my old room, texting Sophia, "Remind me why I do this to myself." Her response was immediate. "Because you are a good person who loves her dad. Hang in there. Call if you need me." The next morning, I woke early and went downstairs to make coffee. The house was quiet, my parents presumably still asleep. As I waited for the coffee to brew, I heard their voices drifting from the study across the hall. The door was partially open and their words carried clearly. "We cannot keep doing this, Gloria," my father was saying. "The credit cards are maxed out. The property taxes are due next month. We have to tell her." "Tell her what?" My mother snapped. "That we are failing?" "That is exactly what she wants to hear so she can swoop in and play savior. That is not fair. She would help us if she knew. I am not taking charity for my child. We will figure it out." "How?" "I am working part-time at a hardware store, making a fraction of my old salary. You refuse to get even a part-time job. We are underwater, Gloria." Their voices dropped, and I strained to hear. My heart was pounding. They were in worse shape than I had realized, and my father had been concealing it from me despite my help with the mortgage. When they came into the kitchen 20 minutes later, I had made a decision. I would offer to help them create a financial plan, something sustainable that would allow them to keep their home and dignity. It was literally my job to help people in financial crisis, and I could do this for them. I waited until we were all seated with coffee before speaking. "Mom, Dad, I could not help overhearing some of your conversation earlier. I know things have been tight since Dad lost his job, and I want to help." My mother's face went white, then red. "You were eavesdropping on us." "No, I was in the kitchen." "Your voices carried." I took a deep breath. "Look, financial planning is what I do professionally. Let me help you create a budget. Maybe look at refinancing options for the house." "So now we need your professional help?" My mother's voice had taken on the dangerous edge I recognized from childhood. "You think we are incompetent, that we cannot manage our own affairs?" "That is not what I said at all." I tried to keep my voice calm. "But it sounds like things are serious, and I have resources and knowledge that could help." "Of course you do," she said sarcastically. "Little Miss Perfect with all the answers. You have no idea what the real world is like. You have had everything handed to you." The unfairness of this statement stunned me. I had worked through college, graduated with loans I had paid off through years of careful budgeting. Nothing had been handed to me except criticism and impossible standards. "Mom, that is not true, and you know it," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I have worked incredibly hard for everything I have, and I am just trying to help." "We do not need your help," she snapped. "And we certainly do not need your judgment." "It is not judgment. It is concern," I insisted. Dad just said you are underwater financially. The property taxes are due. Your credit cards are maxed out. These are serious problems. Problems that are none of your business, she said. This is between your father and me. My father sat silently, staring into his coffee cup. His new Rolex gleamed on his wrist, an ironic symbol of prosperity we all knew was an illusion. Dad, I said softly, please say something. He looked up, his eyes tired. Your mother is upset, Heidi. Maybe we should discuss this another time. That was when something broke inside me. After 3 years of paying their mortgage, after decades of walking on eggshells, after endless criticism and emotional manipulation, I was done being the family punching bag. There will not be another time, I said, my voice shaking. This pattern never changes. Mom attacks, Dad enables, and I am supposed to take it because we are family. Well, I am done. My mother stood up. So quickly her chair tipped backward. How dare you speak to us like that in our own home after everything we have done for you? What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Made me feel inadequate at every turn. Criticized my appearance, my career, my life choices. Taken financial support without acknowledgement or gratitude. Her face contorted with rage. Financial support? What are you talking about? I almost told her about the mortgage payments then, but something held me back. It would only give her more ammunition, more ways to make me feel manipulated. Nothing, I said. Forget it. No, you brought it up. What financial support? The occasional dinner out, the birthday gifts. Do you want a medal for doing the bare minimum a daughter should do? The bare minimum is exactly what I have gotten from you emotionally my entire life, I said, and immediately regretted the honesty. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. My mother exploded. You ungrateful, selfish girl. After everything I sacrificed for you, I gave up my career to raise you. I devoted my life to this family, and this is the thanks I get. Judgment and disrespect in my own kitchen. She began listing every perceived failure of mine since childhood, every time I had disappointed her, every flaw in my character as she saw it. It was a greatest hits compilation of my inadequacies delivered with venom. Something had changed in me, though. For the first time, I heard her words not as truth, but as the desperate lashing out of someone who could not face her own unhappiness. It still hurt, but differently, like an old wound being prodded rather than a fresh cut. I am not doing this anymore, I said quietly, standing up. I am going to pack my bag and go home. Running away as usual, she sneered. Cannot handle the truth? The truth is that you are angry and bitter, and you're taking it out on me because I am a safe target, I said. The truth is that I have been paying your mortgage for 3 years without telling you because I knew you would react exactly like this, making it about your pride instead of practical solutions. The room went silent. My father's face drained of color. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. For once, speechless. Then she found her voice, and it was ice cold. Get out. Mom, my father started, but she cut him off. Get out of my house, she repeated. Get out and never come back. If you think we are such burdens, such failures, then you are free of us. Go live your perfect little life and leave us alone. I looked at my father, searching for any sign that he would stand up for me, for us, for the possibility of healing this broken family dynamic. He looked away. Okay, I said simply. I walked upstairs, packed my overnight bag with mechanical movements, and came back down. My mother had moved to the living room window, her back to the entryway. My father stood helplessly in the hallway. Heidi, she does not mean it, he whispered. Give her time to calm down. She means it, I said, and for once, I am going to take her at her word. I walked out the front door, closing it quietly behind me. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the house where I had grown up, never suspecting it would be the last time I saw it as someone welcomed there. The 40-minute drive from my parents' suburban home to my apartment in the city passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just drove, numb and hollow, as if someone else was controlling my body. When I arrived home, I sat in my parked car for nearly an hour, unable to summon the energy to go inside. Finally, my phone buzzing with a text from Sophia broke the trance. "How's the birthday weekend going? Surviving?" I called her immediately, and to my surprise, my voice was steady as I recounted what had happened. It was only when I reached the part about my mother's final words that my composure cracked. "She told me to get out and never come back," I said. And then the tears came, hot and relentless, and I left Sophia. I just left. "Where are you now?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "In my car, outside my building. I am coming over. Do not move." 20 minutes later, Sophia arrived with a bottle of wine and a bag from the deli down the street. She took one look at me, still sitting in my car, and opened the passenger door, sliding in beside me. "First hug, then food, then wine, then we figure this out," she said, pulling me into her arms. I spent that night on Sophia's sofa, unable to be alone with my thoughts. The next day was Sunday, and she called in sick to her job on Monday to stay with me. By Tuesday, I had to return to work. Though I was barely functional, I went through the motions with clients, my professional mask firmly in place, but inside I was unraveling. My father called several times that first week. I let each call go to voicemail. His messages were vague. "Please call me back, Heidi. We need to talk." No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Just a request for me to once again be the bigger person, to smooth things over as I had done my entire life. There were no calls from my mother. After 10 days of emotional limbo, I made an appointment with a financial advisor colleague to discuss my own situation. I had been paying $2,200 monthly toward my parents' mortgage for 3 years, totaling nearly $80,000. Money I could have put toward my own home, my retirement, or simply enjoying the fruits of my hard work. "Legally, you have no obligation to continue these payments," my colleague Diane advised. "The mortgage is in their names. You are not a co-signer. You have been making a gift, essentially. What will happen if I stop?" I asked. "They will receive notices of non-payment. Eventually, if they cannot make the payments themselves, foreclosure proceedings could begin. But Heidi, that is not your responsibility." I decided to stop the automatic payments immediately. It was both terrifying and liberating, like cutting a cord that had both connected and constrained me. The next step was finding my own place to live, a permanent home rather than the series of rentals I had occupied since college. With the mortgage payments off my monthly budget, I could now afford to look at condos and small houses in neighborhoods I had previously considered out of reach. 2 weeks after the blow-up, I put a deposit on a sunlit 2-bedroom condo in a converted Victorian house. It had bay windows, hardwood floors, and most importantly, it was mine. No one could tell me to get out. No one could make me feel unwelcome in my own space. During this time, I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez, who specialized in family trauma. Our first session was revelatory. "What you are describing sounds like a lifetime of emotional abuse," she said after I recounted my childhood and recent events. "Your mother exhibits classic narcissistic behaviors, and your father is what we call an enabler. But she is not always terrible," I protested weakly. "Sometimes she can be loving, especially when I am doing exactly what she wants. That is part of the cycle of abuse," Dr. Martinez explained. "The periods of apparent normalcy or even affection keep you hoping things will change. They keep you coming back. But has the fundamental dynamic ever really changed?" I had to admit it had not. The good periods were just lulls between storms, never representing real growth or healing. Through therapy, I began to recognize patterns I had never seen before. How my mother would create crises to pull me back when I was establishing independence. How she would undermine my confidence before important life events. How she would pit family members against each other to maintain control. What about the mortgage payments? I asked Dr. Martinez during our third session, was I enabling them by paying without telling them? She considered this thoughtfully. "Your intention was to help, but keeping it secret did prevent them from facing reality. It allowed your father to avoid taking necessary action and your mother to maintain denial about their situation. So I was wrong to help? The thought was painful. Not wrong. You acted out of love and concern, but sometimes helping can hurt in the long run. True help would have been working with them to develop financial independence, not creating financial dependence. The hardest part of those weeks was learning to sit with guilt without acting on it. When I would think about my parents possibly losing their home, my instinct was to rescue them, to sacrifice my own well-being to preserve theirs. Dr. Martinez helped me see this as a conditioned response, not a moral obligation. Your parents are adults who made their own choices, she reminded me. Your father chose not to find adequate employment after his job loss. Your mother chose not to work or adjust their lifestyle. These were choices, not circumstances thrust upon them. Gradually, the panic attack subsided. I slept through the night more often. I stopped checking my phone constantly for messages from my father. I began to embrace the possibility that life could be different, that I could love my family without being consumed by them. I threw myself into making my new condo a home. I painted the walls colors my mother would have hated. A deep teal in the living room, a sunny yellow in the kitchen. I bought furniture that suited my taste rather than what would impress others. I created a home office where I could work on personal financial projects, including a revised retirement plan now that I had an extra $2,200 monthly to invest. Through it all, there was a lingering sadness. Despite everything, I loved my parents. I missed the father who had taught me to ride a bike, who had slipped me extra allowance for books, who had been proud of me before my mother convinced him not to be. I even missed the mother who, in rare moments of connection, would share stories of her own childhood dreams or laugh genuinely at a shared joke. But I could not miss them enough to destroy myself in the process of loving them. That was the boundary I was finally learning to set. Exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after I walked out of my parents' house, my phone rang with my father's number while I was at work. I had been expecting this call, yet was still unprepared for the rush of emotion that hit me when I saw his name on the screen. I was alone in my office between client meetings, so I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Dad. Heidi." He sounded relieved that I had picked up. "How are you, sweetheart?" The casual normalcy of his greeting, as if nothing had happened, was jarring. "I am okay," I said cautiously. "How are you?" "Oh, getting by." There was an awkward pause. "We have missed you at Sunday dinners." I said nothing, waiting. If he wanted to pretend everything was normal, he would have to do it without my help. "Your mother has been asking about you," he continued, which I knew was a lie. If my mother had been asking, it was not out of concern. "Has she?" I kept my voice neutral. He cleared his throat. "Well, you know how she is. She has her pride, but I know she regrets what happened." "Did she say that?" I asked. Another pause. "Not in those exact words, no, but I know she does." My heart sank. Nothing had changed. He was still making excuses for her, still expecting me to accept the unacceptable. "Dad, why are you calling?" I asked directly. Can a father not call his daughter just to check in? He attempted a light tone that fell flat. "After 3 weeks of silence, following Mom, throwing me out of the house? No, that is not just checking in." He sighed, and I could picture him running his hand through his thinning hair, a nervous habit he had had for as long as I could remember. "Heidi, your mother was upset. She said things she did not mean. You know how she gets when she feels backed into a corner." "I do know," I agreed. "I have known my entire life. That does not make it okay." "No one is saying it is okay," he backpedaled. "But family is family. We have to forgive each other." "Forgiveness requires acknowledgement and change, Dad. Has Mom acknowledged what she did? Has anything changed?" The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. "I thought so," I said softly. "She is your mother, Heidi. She loves you in her way. Her way is hurting me. It always has." Another long pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering his courage for what I now realized was the real purpose of his call. "There is something else," he finally said. "Did you know the bank sent us a notice about the mortgage?" My heart began to race, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of notice?" "A late payment notice, then another. They are threatening to begin foreclosure proceedings if we do not catch up." "I do not understand it. The payments have always gone through automatically." "Have they?" I asked. "Yes, for the past 3 years. Ever since." He trailed off, and I could hear the moment realization began to dawn. "Heidi, what did you mean when you said you had been paying our mortgage?" The moment of truth had arrived. Part of me wanted to deflect, to protect him from the reality of how much I had sacrificed while they had taken me for granted. But I was done with secrets and enabling. "I meant exactly what I said, Dad. I have been making your mortgage payments, $2,200 every month for the past 3 years. That is why they were always on time, regardless of your financial situation." The silence that followed was deafening. "That is not possible," he finally said, his voice faint. "We would have known." "How?" "You never looked at the payment details, did you? The bank statement just showed the payment was received. You assumed it was coming from your accounts." "But why would you? How could you afford?" He stammered. "I make good money, Dad. The money you and Mom dismiss as my fancy job. I lived in a smaller apartment than I could afford, drove an older car, limited my expenses, so I could help you keep your home. Because I loved you and could not bear to see you lose everything. Why did you not tell us?" There was pain in his voice now and confusion. "Because I knew Mom would react exactly as she did when I tried to help openly. She would see it as an attack on her pride, on your capabilities, instead of what it was, a daughter loving her parents." 3 years, he repeated, the enormity of it sinking in. That is over $70,000. $79,200 to be exact," I confirmed. "Heidi, I had no idea. I told your mother I had found freelance consulting work that was covering our expenses. I was too ashamed to admit I was stocking shelves at 60 years old." The admission broke my heart. My proud, accomplished father had been reduced to creating fictions to preserve his dignity. "There is no shame in honest work, Dad. The shame is in not facing reality. Does this mean, have you stopped the payments?" He asked, his voice small. "Yes," I said simply. "When Mom told me to get out and never come back, I took her at her word. All of it." "But the house," he began. "Is not my responsibility," I finished firmly. "It never was. You and Mom need to make some hard decisions now. Sell the house you cannot afford. Get jobs that cover your actual expenses. Create a sustainable retirement plan. All things I offered to help with before Mom threw me out." "She will never agree to sell," he said, panic edging into his voice. "Then she needs to get a job, or you need to find better paying work, or both." "But Dad, I cannot keep setting myself on fire to keep you warm." "I understand," he said, though I was not sure he did. "What you did for us. I do not know what to say. You do not need to say anything. But I do need you to understand that things have to change. I am not coming back to the old dynamic. I am not going to be the family scapegoat anymore." "Of course not," he agreed quickly. "I will talk to your mother. I will make her understand." I almost laughed at the idea that he could make my mother understand anything she did not want to acknowledge. Good luck with that. "Could we meet to talk about all this in person?" he asked hopefully. I considered refusing. The thought of facing either of them again so soon made my stomach clench. But I also knew that written boundaries were clearer than unspoken ones. "Not at the house," I said firmly. "I will meet you at Riverside Cafe on Thursday at noon. Just you, not Mom. I am not ready to see her yet." He agreed quickly, thanking me repeatedly before we hung up. After the call ended, I sat at my desk shaking. I had finally told the truth, and the world had not ended. In fact, for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I arrived at Riverside Cafe 20 minutes early on Thursday, choosing a table in the back corner where I could see the door. I had prepared for this meeting with the same thoroughness I would use for an important client presentation. Dr. Martinez and I had role-played potential scenarios. I had written down my boundaries and practiced stating them clearly and calmly. Remember, you are not responsible for their emotions or reactions, she had advised during our emergency session the day before. You are only responsible for communicating your own needs and limits with clarity. My father arrived exactly on time, looking like he had aged years in the few weeks since I had seen him. His shoulders were hunched, his face gaunt. The Rolex I had given him was conspicuously absent from his wrist, and I wondered if he had pawned it already. "Heidi," he said with visible relief, as if he had half expected me not to show up. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. We ordered coffee, and an uncomfortable silence fell between us until the server left. "How have you been?" he asked tentatively. "I have been reflecting a lot," I said, sidestepping the politeness, "on our family dynamics, on my role in them, on what I want moving forward." He nodded, looking down at his coffee. "I have been doing some thinking, too." "Tell me," I encouraged. He took a deep breath. "I want to start by saying I am sorry, not just for what happened that day, but for years of not protecting you from your mother's anger, for allowing you to become her target, for taking your support without acknowledgement." It was more self-awareness than I had expected, and it momentarily threw me off balance. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "After we spoke on the phone, I went through our bank records," he continued. "I saw the truth. For 3 years, you have been carrying us while I pretended everything was fine." He looked up, his eyes wet. "I feel ashamed, Heidi, deeply ashamed." "I did not tell you about the payments to make you feel ashamed," I said. "I did it because I love you and wanted to help." "I know that makes it worse somehow." He wiped at his eyes with a napkin. "A father should provide for his children, not the other way around. At least not when the parents are still able-bodied and capable. It is not about gender roles or traditional expectations, Dad. It is about honesty and reciprocity. I would have gladly helped you if you had been honest about your situation, and if that help had been met with gratitude instead of hostility." He nodded, accepting this. "Your mother and I have had some difficult conversations since your call." "I can imagine," I said dryly. "She did not believe me at first about the mortgage payments. She accused me of making it up to manipulate her." He sighed. "I had to show her the bank statements, the dates of the payments, the account number they came from. And she cried," he said simply. "I have not seen your mother cry in years, not since her father died." I was not sure how to feel about this. Part of me, the wounded child inside, felt vindicated. Another part felt sad that it had come to this. "Did she say anything about how she treated me?" I asked. He hesitated. "She is struggling with that part. She feels humiliated, which makes it hard for her to acknowledge her behavior." "Her humiliation does not erase my hurt," I said firmly. "No, it does not," he agreed. "Which is why I asked her to come here today to apologize to you herself." My heart jumped. "You what?" "I told you I was not ready to see her." "I know, and I am sorry, but I thought if you could just hear her out." The cafe door opened then, and my mother walked in. She spotted us immediately and headed toward our table. I felt like I could not breathe, trapped between my boundary and the approaching confrontation. "You ambushed me," I said to my father, my voice low and angry. "I am sorry," he repeated helplessly. "I thought it would be better this way." My mother reached our table, standing awkwardly beside it. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her normally perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. Like my father, she seemed to have aged rapidly. "Hello, Heidi," she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "I did not invite her to sit. Dad told me you were coming despite my explicit request to meet with him alone." She flinched at my tone. "Yes, I needed to see you." "Why?" She glanced at my father, who nodded encouragingly. "May I sit down?" I considered refusing, but causing a scene in the cafe would only make this more difficult. "Fine." She took the third chair at our table, perching on the edge as if ready to flee. We sat in tense silence until the server returned to take her order. She asked for water only, her voice barely audible. After the server left, she took a deep breath. "Your father showed me the bank records about the mortgage payments." I said nothing, waiting. "I did not know," she continued. "All this time I thought we were managing. I thought Richard's freelance work was covering our expenses. I had no idea you were—" She trailed off, unable to finish. "Paying your mortgage. Supporting you. Being the adult in the relationship," I supplied coldly. She flinched again. "Yes. Would it have mattered if you had known? Would you have treated me any better?" Her eyes widened at my directness. "I do not know. I would like to think so. At least it was honest. Well, now you know. And now it has stopped." "Yes," she said quietly. "The bank has given us 30 days to catch up on the payments, or they will begin foreclosure." "That is not my problem anymore," I said, the words feeling both cruel and necessary. "No, it is not," she agreed, surprising me. "We are looking at options. Richard has applied for better-paying jobs." "I have. I have an interview tomorrow at a real estate office as a receptionist." This was unexpected. My mother had not worked since before I was born. Her identity was wrapped up in being a homemaker, in maintaining the perfect house and hosting the perfect dinner parties. "That is a start," I acknowledged. "But it will not be enough to keep the house." "I know," she said, and there was defeat in her voice. "We have contacted a realtor. She is coming next week to assess the property." I looked at my father, who nodded confirmation. "It is the only sensible option," he said. "We should have done it 3 years ago when I lost my job." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. My mother twisted her hands in her lap. "Heidi, I know an apology is not enough. What I said to you that day, and many days before it, there is no excuse." "No, there is not," I said, still not ready to make this easy for her. "I was cruel to you. I have been cruel to you for years." Her voice broke. "I told myself it was for your own good, that I was pushing you to be your best. But the truth is, I was jealous. This admission stunned me into silence. I gave up my career to raise you children. It was what women of my generation were expected to do. I do not regret having you, but I regret losing myself in the process. And when you became so successful, so independent, doing exactly what I had given up." She shook her head. "It was easier to criticize you than to face my own regrets." It was the most self-aware thing I had ever heard my mother say. Part of me wanted to embrace this moment of vulnerability, to rush toward reconciliation. But the wiser part, the part that had been working with Dr. Martinez, knew that one moment of clarity did not undo decades of damage. "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully, "but I need you to understand that our relationship cannot go back to what it was. I will not be your emotional punching bag anymore. I will not sacrifice my financial security for your comfort. I will not accept criticism disguised as concern." "I understand," she said quietly. "Do you? Because these are non-negotiable boundaries for me now. If you cannot respect them, then we will not have a relationship at all." My father reached across the table toward my hand, but stopped short of touching me. "We want to do better, Heidi. Both of us, we want to rebuild what we have broken if you will give us that chance." I looked between them, these flawed human parents of mine. "I cannot make any promises right now. I am still processing everything that happened, not just that day, but throughout my life. I need time and space." "Of course," my father said quickly. "Whatever you need." And I want you both to consider therapy, I added, individually and as a couple. There are issues here that go beyond money. My mother's mouth tightened reflexively, but she nodded. If that is what it takes. It is a start, I said. As for the house situation, I cannot and will not resume payments, but I can help you create a financial plan for downsizing. I can connect you with resources for job searching. I can advise you on retirement options. That is what I can offer. That is more than we deserve, my father said softly. It is not about deserving, I replied. It is about what I am willing and able to give while maintaining my own well-being. We talked for another hour, more practically now, about house values in their neighborhood, about my father's resume and interview skills, about what size home they could realistically afford on their reduced income. It was the most adult conversation we had ever had, with no emotional manipulation, no tears, no guilt trips. As we prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, then asked, "Would it be all right if I called you? Just to check in occasionally." "Text first," I said. "Ask if I have time to talk. Respect if I say not right now." She nodded, accepting this boundary. "I will." We parted without hugs or promises, just a tentative acknowledgement that something new might be possible, even if the old was irrevocably gone. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not healed, not whole, but moving in the right direction. For the first time in my life, I had stood firm in my truth and my worth, and the world had not ended. In fact, it felt like it might finally be beginning. 6 months can change everything or nothing at all. In my case, it changed almost everything. My new condo became truly mine in ways my previous apartments never had. I painted an accent wall in the living room, that bright teal I had always wanted. I planted herbs on my small balcony. I adopted a cat, a dignified orange tabby named Leo, who greeted me at the door each evening and slept curled against my side each night. My career continued to flourish with the mental energy no longer consumed by family drama. I found myself more creative in my financial planning approaches, more present with clients, more innovative in my investment strategies. I was promoted to senior advisor with my own team, a position that came with a substantial raise and increased flexibility. Dr. Martinez and I continued our weekly sessions, gradually reducing to bi-weekly as I developed stronger emotional boundaries and healthier coping mechanisms. The panic attacks stopped entirely. The nightmares about my mother's criticism faded. The constant background hum of anxiety quieted. "You have done remarkable work, Heidi," Dr. Martinez told me during a session marking our 6-month anniversary of working together. "Many people spend years, even decades, trying to break free from toxic family patterns. You have made tremendous progress in a relatively short time." "It does not feel short," I admitted. "It feels like the longest 6 months of my life." "Growth is painful," she agreed, "but you have not just survived this period, you have transformed through it." My relationship with my parents evolved slowly, with careful steps forward and occasional steps back. My father found a position as a sales manager at a smaller company, making about 60% of his previous salary, but with less stress and more appreciation. He seemed genuinely happier despite the financial adjustment. More surprisingly, my mother not only took the receptionist job, but excelled at it. Within 3 months, she had organized the office so efficiently that they offered to pay for her to get her real estate license. At 63, she was embarking on the career she had abandoned for marriage and motherhood 40 years earlier. "The younger agents ask me for advice," she told me during one of our now regular Sunday phone calls. "They say clients trust me because I have life experience." The pride in her voice was something new, something earned rather than manufactured. It suited her. They sold the Colonial in the suburbs, making enough profit to pay off their credit card debt and put a down payment on a 2-bedroom townhouse closer to the city. It was a third of the size of their previous home, but required far less maintenance and was within their new budget. I do not miss the big house as much as I thought I would, my father confessed when we met for lunch one day. All those rooms we never used, all that stuff we never needed. It feels good to simplify. The most significant change, though, was that my mother began seeing a therapist of her own. It was not at my insistence. She made the decision after breaking down at work one day when a client resembling me came in with her young daughter. I suddenly saw us, you and me, as we were when you were little, she explained, before I became so critical, when you still looked at me with complete trust, and I realized how much I had destroyed. Her therapist diagnosed her with narcissistic tendencies rooted in her own childhood trauma, a pattern she had unwittingly perpetuated. The work was difficult and often painful for her. There were sessions after which she would call me, voice raw from crying, to apologize for specific incidents from my childhood that she had finally recognized as harmful. I accepted these apologies cautiously, neither rushing to forgive nor holding on to resentment. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that forgiveness was a process, not a single act, and that it was primarily for my own peace rather than my mother's absolution. Our new relationship was built on clearer communication and firmer boundaries. I visited them in their new home once a month, no more. We spoke on the phone weekly, but I felt free to end calls that became negative or draining. I no longer automatically said yes to every request, no longer felt responsible for their happiness or security. The strange thing is, my father observed during a rare moment of insight, now that you are not carrying us, we have learned to stand on our own. It has been good for us, as painful as the process was. The hardest lesson for all of us was learning the difference between helping and enabling. I still offered professional financial advice, but I no longer paid their bills. I celebrated their successes, but did not rescue them from the consequences of their choices. I loved them without sacrificing myself in the process. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in less than a year. The previous Christmas had been tense and performative, with expensive gifts exchanged in the grand house, everyone pretending we were the perfect family. This Christmas would be simpler in their modest townhouse, with homemade gifts and honest conversation. What I have learned, I told Sophia over dinner at my place, is that standing up for myself did not destroy my family. It transformed it into something more authentic. You gave them the opportunity to grow by refusing to stay small, she observed wisely. Exactly. And I gave myself permission to live my own life, not the one my mother had scripted for me. That script had always ended with me married to a successful man, living in a house like theirs, having children who would repeat the cycle. Instead, I was building a different story, one where success was measured by peace rather than possessions, where relationships were based on mutual respect rather than obligation, where love did not require the sacrifice of self. The irony was that by setting those boundaries, by refusing to continue paying the mortgage and enabling their financially unsustainable lifestyle, I had helped my parents find their own strength and independence. My mother was happier working than she had ever been as a homemaker. My father was rediscovering interests and friendships that had been overshadowed by career pressure. We were all, in our own ways, finally growing up. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not sacrificing everything, but rather allowing others the dignity of facing reality. Sometimes the strongest families are not those that never break, but those that learn how to rebuild differently after breaking. Sometimes the deepest healing comes only after the most painful truths have been spoken aloud. If you have found yourself in a similar situation, trapped in unhealthy family dynamics or carrying burdens that are not yours to bear, I hope my story offers some encouragement. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary for authentic relationships. Loving someone does not mean sacrificing your well-being for theirs. You can honor your family while still honoring yourself. I would love to hear about your experiences with family boundaries or financial independence in the comments below. Has anyone else discovered that stepping back actually helped their loved one step up? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more authentic conversations about family dynamics and personal growth. Share it with someone who might be struggling with similar challenges. Thank you for listening. And remember, true love uplifts rather than diminishes. Take care of yourselves and each other.